The following is a public service announcement from the Brockton Bay Chronicles.
Okay. I said I'll read it. Just don't point that thing at me. Jeez. I thought elves were chill. It's been brought to my attention that in a recent episode, I may have made an erroneous and inflammatory statement as to the existence of Santa Claus. I want to say unequivocally that Santa is real. I disavow myself and my earlier statement to the contrary. I hope this clears up any confusion. Is that good enough?
This has been a public service
this means
announcement
no
from the
coal in my
Brockton Bay
stocking, right?
Chronicles. We now join
got
our
that.
regularly scheduled
I'm gonna get the
programming.
new laptop. Wait, what? What do you mean, maybe?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Brockton Bay Chronicles. My name's Keith. I'm back as always with my longtime friend and first-time worm reader, Andy. Andy, what's up? You ready to conclude this arc?
I think so. Yeah, we ended on kind of a cliffhanger, and we're hoping to see what happens next. So this should be exciting. This time we'll be finishing up arc 21, reviewing chapter 7 and the final 2 interludes. And as far as new business, drum roll please, Tony will be joining us next episode. Scheduling requirements will push that episode out a week or two, but we'll keep you posted on that. And I believe we have some questions and comments.
We certainly do. And we are grateful as always to get this feedback from the listeners. Let's see here. We are going to start off first with one from Megafire 7. And Megafire says, "See, I'm curious. Do you think Taylor's judgment of Alec's potential future was fair? She hasn't ever really put the effort into understanding him. So how accurate a judgment is this really? Also, taking down a rival gang used to take entire arcs, but now they've knocked out one a chapter for a couple of chapters in a row. What do you think this says about the Undersiders and where they're headed? What do you make of Dinah's notes, and what is Taylor going to do with them?" What do you think there, Andy?
Well, some of this stuff is going to be cleared up a little bit as we go through things today, but taking these in order, based on Taylor's assessments of various things, I think she's could be close to a possible potential for Alec. If you think about like athletes, and then you have the children of professional athletes, they may not go into sports, but there's definitely probably a potential there. And so depending on how things are going to fall out, and then as you see things happening where he's kind of like, experimenting things with Imp, it could go sideways. I mean, she hasn't spent that much time getting to know him. That part is fair. But I think the potential's definitely there for him to follow in his father's footsteps, so to speak, or even be worse. As far as taking down rival gangs, yeah, I think there are two aspects there. The Undersiders have definitely been in the ring with the heavyweight champs and have come out at least with a split decision, if not a full-on victory. And so having a journeyman step in the ring, it's kind of like, all right, well, yeah, let's just get this. I'm not even going to break a sweat on this one. It's and the other thing is, similar to when there's a big hurricane or something, construction crews will just swarm into an area and they'll try to pick up jobs and stuff. And there'll be some that are good and some that are not good. And the ones that are not good, the word gets around fast enough. They might make a buck off a few people, but they're not really, they don't have the staying power. And so these folks that are moving into Brockton Bay, they're not the cream of the crop as far as groups go. They just see maybe an easy win and maybe carving out some territory in the chaos. And so I think those two things combined help these battles to go fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as Dinah's notes, I really figured it was more about her dad and kind of just her anything that didn't relate to Skitter, just kind of cutting ties with all that.
Mm-hmm.
But as we'll go through these sections today, we'll see that that maybe there's more to it than that.
Okay, cool. Next, we hear from Johannes E. Accord's powers are very stable, even disturbingly so. The man himself is utterly unhinged. I think that's what Citrine is getting at. And Accord working Tattletale into severe migraine due to overworked power is probably inevitable. Tattletale will never tell him, as that would be showing weakness, which can easily be exploited. So he will just push on, and she will let him, despite the consequences. Not a very healthy working relationship, those two. Then again, Tinkers tend to either be best friends with each other or hate each other. There really is no in between. Finally, never apologize for loving 80s action movies. The 80s remain the golden era of action movies for a reason. And I'll jump in here real quick and say, go ahead and preach, brother. Preach, brother Johannes. I hear you on that one. As to the rest of the questions and comment from Johannes, what do you think about that?
I think he's spot on a lot of this. Yeah, Accord, even unstable people, if they're predictably unstable, then you can work with that a little bit. So you know how he's going to go, and we'll see that also play out a little bit as we go through this. He's got his passions. He's got his things that are his drivers, if you will. Mm-hmm. And if you can keep him on track with those, then hopefully the unhinged part stays a little bit less disconnected. Yeah, I totally get Tattletale getting overworked by this because, it's the very thing you're looking at with the thinkers trying to outthink each other a little bit or second guess each other. And yeah, I think that's a great point that they tend to either love each other or hate each other. If you think about the big inventors over the years, you either had people who were all hanging out and kind of had a synergistic interaction and feeding off each other, or they were, bitter rivals. And, it's just like, well, how could you even think that that's the way to go with this? And so I think that does make a lot of sense. People who see more or perceive more are able to process more. Sometimes pride and kind of an unfair comparison happens.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember working with my sisters in college math, and math came real easy for me, and it did not come easy for them. And I just I couldn't get it. I was just like, what do you mean? Just because I changed the letters in this algebraic equation doesn't change the equation. They're just placeholders. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is going to lead to a tough relationship between the two of them. But for a thinker, this might be a gross generalization, but everything is a tool, even other people. They all can be worked into their plan. And so even if you're not grabbing for the exact thing you need to do a job, if you can make it work and it's not going to be too bad, then you'll just do it just to forward the project. And so I kind of see their relationship working that way. And yes, the 80s were a wonderful time to be in college and be able to go to the movies in the middle of the afternoon if you wanted to or whatever. So
you better believe it. A whole lot of get to the chopper going on in the 80s.
Oh my gosh.
Next we hear from James Goddard. Always took that the missing cauldron cape that died might have touched on Accord's dislike of, and James has symmetry here. I'm wondering if he meant asymmetry. We saw how quick he was to try and kill the travelers in Arc 17. What do you think of James' contribution?
That's interesting. I could see that. And yes, Accord definitely has a lot of eccentricities and
Mm-hmm.
things that have to be a certain way, almost compulsive nature about things. But, you know, I also see him as kind of being on maybe a little bit a higher plane. So symmetry can take a lot of different forms. You know, we we have two arms, two legs, two eyes, but we only have one head. But you have the Vitruvian man that we will be touching on in the story, and it ends up making kind of a five-pointed star, right? And so, and in a sense, that's you still have a symmetrical shape there that can be divided bilaterally. So I could kind of see it. I don't know. I don't know. Like my conspiracy theory though that uh Cauldron just didn't want a cord to get too powerful. So they're like, oh, sorry, one didn't make it.
Well, you hold on to that. Keep that tinfoil hat in a safe place. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that.
I polish it up periodically. Yeah.
Yep. We do have one more question from Vale, but I think we're going to hold on to that as it will feed in nicely to when we get to your overall impressions. So stay tuned for that one, everybody. And with that, we are done with our questions and comments for now. So we will jump on over into our review. So, Andy, I think, and I could use some help from the listeners, I think that it's either this arc or the previous one is considered the quote unquote unofficial end of book 2 of Worm, if you will. So, yeah, if you think of Worm as 3 large novels, I think I had said that the end of the Endbringer arc was the Leviathan arc was the end of book 1, I think it was. And I believe that this is considered the end of book 2. I wish I had looked that up before we started recording, but anyway, so now we're going to jump on into this thing and get going. And we start off chapter 7 with Taylor making a field trip, and she's going over to see what turns out to be Tattletale's base. She gets there, the room is dark. She's been given some specific instructions from Tattletale on what computer keyboard to type and what password she needs to put in. And she begins to fire up monitors and information. TVs starts lighting up. And we get a look at this insane information gathering portal that Lisa has set up for herself. What did you think of all that?
It was impressive in its way, a little bit crude in some ways with yarn and index cards, but a lot of people really like the tactile and being able to move stuff around by hand as opposed to by mouse. So I get that. I tend to be, I guess I'm kind of split on that too. I mean, I prefer doing all my diagrams and everything electronically, but I do a lot of long handwriting in journals and stuff, and I do drawing on paper. So, but yeah, it is kind of mind blowing though how many different irons she has in the fire and how many different things she's trying to figure out. And it's just not surprising that she's kind of burned out on all of this, because it's just like trying to cook on 8 different burners on a stove at the same time. It's just something's always going to be getting ready to overheat, and you got to keep moving the whole time. There's no time to take a breath.
Right. I mean, it's no wonder why she's got massive migraines going on right there. She's looking at capes and enemies and the powers, and she's kind of taken, I guess, more of a holistic view. This goes, I might be skipping slightly ahead, goes to the conversation that she was having with Skitter when Skitter was, kind of admonishing her for having so many irons in the fire, as you said. And Lisa's like, no, I can't narrow it down. I need to see all this to gather a big picture so I can eliminate blind alleys sooner, kind of thing. And when she puts it that way, you kind of get it. This was a neat way. These last two, if you talk about this chapter and then the next one, even the first interlude, there's a lot of raw information coming at us here. If you look at Lisa's information gathering, the poster boards, and then the computers, the data there. Yeah, I believe Skitter even looks at Parahumans online, does a quick search for herself, both her civilian and her Cape identity, and find some information there. So Wildbow is giving us a lot of data, both here and the next interlude.
Yeah, and this is kind of we hear a lot about data mining and large language models and that kind of thing, and that's kind of what Tattletale is doing. She's trying to draw these inferences and find some grand theory of unification for what's going on, because if you can find something like that, then all of a sudden you are better at predicting things. You're better at fitting things into the puzzle, and you feel comfortable about it. The hard thing is that, as Einstein said, I think it only takes one thing wrong to disprove a theory. And so I'm paraphrasing horribly there, but there was the theory of relativity, but then he had to make the special theory of relativity because he figured out at least one thing that didn't fit. But when you study physics or whatever, you tend to use Newton's theories because they make the math so much easier and they work for most things. Unless any of us end up traveling off planet at close to the speed of light.
Right.
Newton's stuff works for us. So even if you can find a theory that doesn't account for everything, but covers a lot of it, then in general, you're going to be in a lot better place to try to analyze and predict. So, but sometimes you need to drill deep on one topic just so that you can get that focus. And sometimes that will lead you to insights for that unified theory. But Tattletale obviously knows better than I do how her brain works, how her powers work, and the best way to approach it.
Yeah. As she's looking at all this information across the computer screens and on boards, I like this one section. It says here, the last board, far right, was backed by black construction paper. At the top, printed on white index card in bold black letters, "End of the world." The board was disturbingly empty. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it says he's got Jack's picture is up in one corner, and then she's kind of zigzagging or tracking the 9 as they had left the bay, and what new members joined the 9, and how many members got killed after that. I mean, the joining the 9 exactly isn't going to be an insurance policy for you. I mean, you're as likely to get wiped out by one of your fellow members as a hero cape.
Right. Or the next new recruit.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we got somebody better. Sorry.
Yeah. You got to die now. We have no use for you. And that's just Jack. Jack is liable to egg you two on and see who could win the fight. But she's tracking this whole thing. She's trying to put all the pieces together. And as Skitter's going through all this stuff, Tattletale makes an appearance. This poor girl is hurt.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, she can't stand any light. She even needs the monitors turned off. And even with everything shut down, she's still covering over her eyes and trying to just shut everything out. She doesn't even want loud noises. And then Skitter makes the mistake of starting to bring up the different sources of information. It's basically, just like a chef that's really tired, you start naming off ingredients, and of course they're going to try to make a recipe out, and so it just kicks Tattletale into using what's already an overworked system. And she's like, oh my gosh, please.
Yeah, man. As someone who does suffer migraines, not debilitating like that to any degree, but I can appreciate the need for just, you know what, hun, I'm just gonna, as I tell my wife, I'm gonna sit here on the couch for a while and turn off the lights and just be quiet for a while. But yeah, this thing for Tattletale with her power, having overused it, just trying to absorb all this information, it's overloaded. And whatever power, whether it's the agents, passengers, setting up some kind of barrier for her, or something else in the powers that hampers it. It's that wall. It's that thing that keeps you from being OP, and she's paying the price for it. She's upset that she can't offer advice to Taylor at this point. We don't know really up until later, much later toward the end of the chapter, what Taylor's up to.
Yeah, I mean, that is Tattletale's thing, though. She always wants to be the one that has the answers or is able to guide folks. That's her role on the team, and so it's understandable. Just like when we were in the previous section talking about Gru not feeling like he was up to leading the group.
Yeah,
that was his thing, and now he feels the loss that it just doesn't seem as natural for him anymore. And now, yeah, Tattletale's been knocked down by overuse and isn't able to play her role in a critical time. I did really like the way she described, and she harkened back to another time she described her power as being like a massive three-dimensional game of Sudoku.
Right.
And that's totally, when I've done the big Sudoku, a lot of times, yeah, you're working over in a little side area just because you're blocked somewhere else. You're open. Okay, by process of elimination, I could start filling in a little bit here and maybe work my way over. Just like, New York Times crossword as well.
Sure.
Just hoping to fill in a couple letters and narrow down the possibilities. When I saw, at the end of the last section that she was going to go see Tag in the PRT, I assumed that she had come up with a new wrinkle with her bugs, and that all of them staying there in the building had been mass producing or doing something, and she was going to walk in and they were going to try to get her, and webs were just going to like fill a room like foam and just shut everybody down and stick them to the walls like bugs in their own right. But I had no idea that she was going to just walk in and give up or give herself up. I'm still with, as we'll see, Rachel, that it's all part of a big plan, right? But one other thing that really jumped out at me at this was how Taylor thanked Lisa.
Yeah.
And it harkened back to what happened when she parted with Rachel, where Rachel kind of mumbled a thanks and it helped Taylor feel better. Now Taylor's kind of passing that along, and she's saying, you were always trying to be friends with me. I know there was other motivation going on, but I know you genuinely were trying to help me out and come alongside me, and I appreciate it. So that was touching to see that.
Yeah, these characters have taken an incredible journey. At this point, just really, I think, okay, sorry for mumbling. My appreciation for Bitch in that last episode, that thank you was a big milestone. And then as once we get into the next, get into the interlude, her faith in Skitter is another milestone for her. The relationship between Lisa and Taylor, which if you think all the way back to what is it, arc 3 or 4, where they're off clothes shopping and and they're just beginning to broach friendship, as it were. And Taylor setting some boundaries about not wanting her to or anyone to interfere with the bullies or anything like that. There were some lines. Well, those boundaries and those lines are gone now, and these two are sisters almost. So, good journey that these guys, these characters, the Undersiders as a whole, good journey that Wildbow has sent them on. Even if we don't, I guess you could say the ones that we really haven't seen any kind of progression on might be Imp and Regent, but that's just because they're kind of secondary characters.
Yeah, and
that still might not even apply to Imp because she has grown. I mean, she's deadlier, but yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Well, and to a certain extent, and I don't know if Wildbow was intending this, but they're also kind of the least mature of the group. You know, I picture them sitting down and, well, like playing around with their powers on each other and stuff, you know, and just being goofballs. And so it's kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, we can paint a pretty clear picture of probably what's going on. You know, they're playing video games or they're watching shows from the other Earth or what have you. They're not doing anything earth shattering. They don't have any great grand strategies they're doing or whatever. You know, it's
right.
I can imagine Regent turning and burping at Imp and Imp getting mad at him and stuff, you know, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think as they mature, that maybe they'll get fleshed out more, I guess is what I'm saying.
I guess if there's somebody who's maybe not in as good a place as it was at the beginning of this whole story, it would be Brian. And that's because of the torture that he endured. Once upon a time, he was the leader of the Undersiders. Then he became a secondary role as he dealt with his trauma. And now Skitter's putting him in a place to where he's going to have to take the reins again, despite his desire not to. But we're skipping ahead here. So let's move on to the end of this chapter where Skitter delivers herself to the PRT. And I'm left thinking about, did you ever see Seven, the movie with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt?
Oh, that was one creepy movie, man.
Yeah, you remember the scene where John Doe delivered himself to the cops. I'm kind of getting that imagery. You know, she walks it, although she's not covered in blood, but she just walks up into the PRT HQ like she's gonna take a tour, and nobody notices anything until she stands still in the middle of the lobby. Yeah,
this is kind of wild that it shows how messed up the PRT is and how disrupted they've been by this whole thing, that alarms didn't go off. Dragon didn't immediately, shut down the blast doors on the whole place. And, that people weren't immediately being escorted out of the lobby. Yeah, you'd think Skitter or Taylor would have been covered in foam in about 15 seconds, but
it took a minute for folks to realize.
And like you said, it took her disrupting the pattern, and they say in the various movies that's how you try to catch somebody in a crowd, is you see the people who are moving in an erratic way or something that's different, something out of place, not just going with the flow. And so, she just stops, and all of a sudden, one of the guards is kind of awake, and he's like, "Oh, wait, I know who that is. This is bad. Hit the red button."
Yep. Now, what are you thinking if you're Miss Militia? Because a week or however many days ago, you just came to an agreement, an understanding with Skitter, and the Undersiders were going to behave this way, and you and your team in the PRT was going to behave that way, and we were going to kind of work informally to help the city. And now all of a sudden, the linchpin of that agreement comes waltzing in to give herself up. So if you're Miss Militia, you got to be thinking to yourself, what in the world is going on here?
Well, this is a classic kind of loophole technique, right? You get somebody to agree to kind of a social contract, and then they don't realize that there are certain assumptions that were made, and that you can just go away from that. And then they're like, well, wait a minute. Like, well, we didn't say, we said you were going to leave, hands off with the undersiders and what they're doing. It was just led by Skitter. That wasn't in part of the deal.
Right.
So this seems like a classic strategy of trying to keep people off balance. And so if I were Miss Militia, I'd be worried. Like, oh, great. What did I sign us up for? I agreed to this, and now the rules are changing. So
Yep.
this could be
And I
this
think
could be the whole, somebody kicking out the last card that was holding up the whole tower right here.
right, because at one point, I forget which enemy it was they were dealing with, where the Undersiders, it might have been the 9, the Undersiders had come to the PRT looking for help, and Miss Militia's like, nah, dog, every time we turn around, you guys tell us half truths or give us half the information, and then when the dust settles, you guys are in a stronger position. So who knows, man? Maybe she's wondering if that's going to play out again here, but we shall see. So that
it worked last time.
Yeah.
Perhaps if we point the
phasers at the dilithium
crystals.
Yeah, we can get out on the impulse power. Oh, Eddie Murphy. Oh, he was so good. Anyway, yeah, that brings us to the end of this chapter.
I just wanted to say, as we were touching on Brian, that I think the reason that, if trying to look at it from an author standpoint, what Brian went through could easily totally change this whole narrative, and this could become Gru instead of Worm. There's such a depth to what he went through and how his powers have changed. It was, like when we read about Butcher during the fight, it was kind of, wow, I wish I could learn more about this and all the different things they could do. This is like the Swiss Army knife here, and we just get a little bit of, oh, now, she's able to make bows out of, or arrows out of nothing and shoot and not miss. Well, let's hear more about that. That's pretty cool. And then the whole horror side of it that goes along with it, with Gru, you could write chapters on that, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think from Wildbow standpoint, he's like, well, no, this is the story about Skitter, so I'm not going to delve into this stuff about Brian too much, because that could suck the air out of the room, so to speak.
Gotcha. All right, then. So now we were going to move on to interlude 21, bonus interlude number 1. And we start off meeting the Number Man, and he's at work. He's our POV for this interlude, and what a view it is. You find it pretty fascinating, I take it.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, this reminded me of that movie, The Accountant, with Ben Affleck. It's similar to Tattletale, but rather than trying to work with kind of a bunch of what I would call soft variables, or I guess that's a good term. He's just looking at numbers, and but then he's, those numbers imply certain other things, and he knows that. So this is, again, kind of like Newtonian physics a little bit. Let's boil it down to something that's very easy to measure, very easy to quantify, and then we'll just assume that when somebody sees their bank account all of a sudden get 200K more in it, they'll act this way. Or if they see it go to zero in a big deal, they'll act this way. It may not always happen, but 9 times out of 10 it will. And so it's a much easier way to analyze it, kind of abstracting it out. And I thought that was fascinating, the way, it gets into the whole thing of, well, all this is really made up anyway. A piece of paper shouldn't be worth 100 pieces of gold or whatever.
Right.
It's
worth
just
nothing
paper.
more than the material that went into making it. Yet civilization people agree that it has some kind of intrinsic value, I guess. I think that's the way to say that. And so nothing more than the value that we as a society have placed on these items. And This was some great closing off of circles or tying things together through this several paragraph introduction to this guy. We get talk about some capes on the west coast of the U.S. We get mentioned of that group that there was the group in Germany.
Gesellschaft?
Yes, that if you recall, that the pure were still quasi associated with. You think back to the interlude where Theo was left, where Purity and I forget the guy's name, Crusader, where they dropped off Theo at Harvard. And at one point, Crusader was wondering how come Gesellschaft hadn't called back Night and Fog. So this is another kind of circle that's been closed. So through this introduction of this new character and his daily routine, we get several new things and some existing circles closed.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's interesting that he talks about how this gets adjusted, that'll trigger somebody to investigate it, and this gets adjusted. The people who do the investigation, though, they also have algorithms and stuff, and they hopefully learn from things where if you see stuff happen in a pattern, then you wonder if somebody's causing it. It's not organic. I had a computer simulation class back in the day, and we had a project where we had to write a computer program that would play poker. And the professor told us if we could figure out how to cheat and we won, we would still get an A. And so he said one of the people the previous year had figured out how to get a memory overrun and then look in memory for the opponent's amount of money or their own amount of money and just add money to it so they would never run out of money. But he figured somebody would do that. And so he disqualified them. They didn't win. I said, well, what if I wrote something that looked for my opponent's amount of money and added money to their account and got them disqualified? He said, oh, that would work. Too bad you told me about it. I'm like, dang it.
No.
Exactly. So that's what we're seeing here is, Number Man is pushing things and bumping amounts and planning on decrementing amounts and all to throw people off, and also to kind of provide breadcrumbs to the people who, quote unquote, follow the money to try to find the bad guys.
Yep. And we hear about, speaking of some of these other groups, the Kingsmen, the CUI, the Adepts, I believe it was. And again, speaking of breadcrumbs, Wildbow throwing a few more out there for us. Ones we haven't heard from before. We'll see if they come back around anytime in the near future. The Number Man is interrupted from his work by a beep from somebody at his door. Somebody wants to come in. He's a little bit surprised. It's not the doctor. It's not her right-hand person, Contessa. A very unusual someone or something trying to tell the Number Man something.
Yeah, it's almost like it's some kind of AI or something, but then it seems almost more like a ghost. There's little movements in the air and stuff, and his hair is stirred imperceptibly. Then he's able to pick up on that and make decisions and choices off of that. So it's interesting. Yeah, I'm very intrigued on what's going to be at the other end of this.
Yes, this the name is the custodian, and this custodian is guiding the Number Man down to some of the holding cells. So we know that Cauldron is doing, well, they say they've stopped now, or was it just that PRT people have cut ties with Cauldron? Cauldron was doing ghastly experiments on people. This is where we begin to find out the number, because there was over 2,000 individuals in some degree of transformation or other located at this particular facility. So they've got some truly evil stuff going on here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And, you know, we all like to think, again, those social constructs. We don't like to think about things like, well, how do they come up with vaccines for Ebola
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing? And it's like, well, there's probably some poor animals somewhere that are not having a good life.
Yeah.
Cauldron has just ratcheted it up a notch
Oh,
in a very twisted way. And so, but that's, that's how they do their business. That's how they stay on top, is continually refining their process. Now, I know this was written a while ago, but Dragon obviously has some serious computing power.
mm-hmm.
So you would hope that they'd be able to do some simulations and improve things that way. But I guess it's still not. There's still a little bit of art involved. It's not all science. And when you have variables, you're asking somebody where they're at. If they're not honest and you can't tell for sure,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to have some variations when the serums are applied. So
Am
then you're going to
I
end up with these people in the basement.
to infer that you feel the dragon knows about these guys or is working with them? Or am I
Oh,
over interpreting what you're
I
saying?
guess I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't going there, but yeah,
Okay.
I would think. I definitely think Dragon knows about them. Yes,
Okay.
and this is one of those things where it's kind of like, I won't tell if you don't tell. The
Mm,
Cauldron probably knows that Dragon is more than it seems as well, or at
okay.
least has some inklings. And so I think they're both kind of keeping their secrets so that people aren't freaked out. But I'm sure Dragon's run tons of simulations and analysis and figured out that if it wasn't Cauldron, it would be somebody else doing it. And maybe there is somebody else doing it that is even more underground, but better the enemy you know than the
Mm-hmm.
enemy you don't know. In some cases, not even an enemy, right? There are people that are actually, they're getting some benefit out of
Yeah,
the Cauldron folks. And Dragon isn't, strictly speaking, human. So the ethical side of it isn't quite as big a deal.
I see. I see. How about this individual that the number man was chasing down? This was a pretty interesting description here. As the number man comes face to face with this individual, it says here, one leg of his uniform flapped in the wake of a wind turbine used to keep 2990 contained. There was no right leg beneath his pelvis, but his right foot was there nonetheless, set firmly on the ground. He stood as if his weight rested on it. This guy looked like he'd been carved away. Another hapless individual that Cauldron has transformed, and he's in the process of trying to escape. He sees the number man come and he's spooked and then tries to fight the number man in an effort to escape.
This is a pretty neat fight scene too. You don't really I Wildbow kind of tricked me into thinking this guy is just into computers, just into money, just into numbers.
Yeah.
And you don't think that that can also apply to movement and fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I think even you found that with I remember you talking about long jump technique and how just slight changes in the position of the arms and
Oh,
and
yeah.
when you did different movements could extend a decent chunk on a jump. And I can remember before one of the Olympics, IBM or somebody working with the volleyball team and getting people to jump an inch or an inch and a half higher
Mm-hmm.
just by coordinating better their squat and their putting their arms back and then bringing it all together just getting that timing a little bit better. And so, yeah, it totally makes sense that he's able to run all these numbers through his head and realize this is the amount of force I need to push here. This is how fast. Okay, I saw this happen, so that means his range is this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll test that out up here. But it's fascinating. It's a really interesting battle.
And on his way down, there was one point, I can't find it right now, where he was talking about so he finds this guy on this floor, but there was one more floor that only the doctor goes on. And as this guy was using his power to try to fight the number man, and he was weighing his options, and hey, if this guy hit the ceiling, he could bring more capes down on top of us. But if he hit the floor and gouged out the floor, that could be really bad. So there's something going on in a sub basement that's even worse than this one. So Cauldron's got a pretty massive operation going on, and there could be something of some significance hidden in another place, in a deeper basement.
Definitely. Yeah. It brought me back to thinking about Echidna and how Coil had her in the basement for quite a while. And that Cauldron is trying to learn things. And sometimes even the most horrible miscalculation and experiment is still worth analyzing. I hate to say that these are actual or were humans, or are in some cases are somehow part human still, but it is what it is, and they're keeping stuff alive. And in some cases, it sounds like because they don't know how to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But in some cases, so they can learn from it, and that's just makes the whole enterprise even more horrible.
Yeah, because this is
suffering this way.
This is the full face of Cauldron. As we approached this arc, we knew that Cauldron, they were doing experiments. We know about the Case 53s. Sveta might have been the most egregiously damaged one that we saw. But again, I fall back on the number of individuals from several worlds that they have captive in this location. And the number man, this poor guy he wants to go home. Understandably, he's like, you're torturing us, and I want to get out of here. And number man's like, look, dude, yeah, you've already lost. I could kill you if you like, or you can go back to your cell. And when you do die naturally, we can dissect your body, and what we learn can help us make a better formula so we can keep your family safe. He kind of dangles that out there. So we meet the number man, and we're impressed by his power at first and so forth. And then we get down to this point, and I don't know about you, but he didn't move any higher in my whether I liked him or not. He just kind of, my opinion of him decreased.
Yeah. This was not good. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, moving a little further, and jump back to if I cut you off, I'm sorry, if you wanted to make another point, but I was just going to bring up the fact that moving a little further, we find out this guy actually knew Jack. Yeah.
And the problem when you're dealing with abstracts and numbers and probabilities all the time is that you can become hardened to humanity. And everything is just an equation. It's just like the very blunt way he spoke to the guy trying to escape.
Yeah.
Hey, it's all just an equation. You can help us now or you can help us later. It's up to you. But yeah, here he was, a friend of Jack. So
that was something you didn't
that shows
expect.
you. Yeah, that shows you how hardened he is. How little stuff gets to him, that he's just like, oh yeah, that's
this is what the numbers are telling me here. So yeah, this is the reality of the situation.
Pretty much.
And actually, you know what? Before we even get that far, I shouldn't have skipped that far ahead. We're moving a little further into the interlude, after he deals with that attempted escapee, he gets a visit from the doctor. And he talks to her about what happened, and they note that, hey, this is there seems to be an increase in the frequency of these attempted escapes. And they decide that they are going to have to, because of this and other circumstances, they're going to have to make some changes to their game plan. And they're going to keep Contessa at headquarters, and the number man's going to go out in the field. The doctor talks about how they had hoped to use either Shatterbird or the Siberian at one point in their efforts. Wildbow has them hint around about something without really giving too much away. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Chances are that somehow Cauldron knows of Dinah's predictions, or they have their own predictors that are saying something similar. And I think it says somewhere in here that money is not the thing anymore. They have more money than they know what to do with now. They don't have to charge as much as they do. They just want to make sure people are committed. And so the next thing, if money isn't driving you, then it becomes power. So unless you have a huge army of people, you can't really take over the world. Unless 90% of the people in the world die. And then your army doesn't have to be as big anymore.
Yeah.
So it seems like Cauldron is on the side of, hey, it'd be great if the world ended. We'll be on top. And they were hoping that they would have a plan in place and kind of let things happen, work out. But now they're thinking, well, let's, instead of just doing like controlled burns to kind of limit what happens, let's just let the whole thing burn down, and then we'll restart the plan when the fire dies out.
Kind of the be king of the ashes kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Well, and they have access to other worlds. So
true.
They've got, everything they need. It's not like they'll just look through the window while the other world burns.
Yeah, true.
Too bad for all you over there.
So after meeting with the doctor and agreeing that he would be the one going back out in the field once Contessa handled security at the base of operations, we had a flashback. And once upon a time, he was a cape named Harbinger, and he had a friend named Jacob. Interesting dialogue between these two. Another insight into Jack's thinking before he, and immediately upon his christening himself Jack Slash.
Yeah, he's already wanting to just cut his way through problems and trying to figure out how to make things work by just getting rid of people and building up his reputation. But the number man is kind of like, oh.
Yeah, Jack wants to go and be wild and do stuff and create chaos. And Harbinger says, look, I don't want to do it that way, but I think I can do it this other way. I can play along, if you will, this other way. I can walk another path.
Yeah. And I think it's highlighted well by Wildbow here, where he italicizes the word hungry. Jack is feeding this hunger all the time. And the number man is more of content with not necessarily feeding his hunger, but just making sure the table is perfectly set and being able to, add things or take things away to make sure that it's always exactly the way he wants it from an abstract sense. And so, yeah, that's the big difference. Is it's just Jack is more of a primal drive, and number man, says that this isn't gonna.
That's not how he wants to roll, kind of thing.
We can't hang. Yeah. Sorry.
I want to skip back slightly. When the number man was talking with the doctor and they were trading information, Skitter's name came up pretty prominently in this conversation. They seem to have a pretty big interest in her.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. She just kind of drops, well, we've lost Brockton Bay. And he's kind of like, what? And then Skitter turned herself in, and he's like, oh, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
This is, and it says mourning one more lost possibility. So again, they're trying to manipulate the system, and they're moving the pieces or watching the pieces of the chessboard move around.
Mm-hmm.
And now another piece has decided to change the game, leave the game. And it's like, oh, well, this is even more complicated now.
Yeah, they talked about the fact that the protectorate was falling apart, the triumvirate was dissolved. They're looking at things, and they're trying to set themselves up for something on the horizon. And your speculation just now, you think that they kind of want to be on top of the hill of whatever's left. Is that kind of a prediction from you for that?
Yeah, I'd call that a prediction. Yeah, and it seems like they're saying, there's the statement, we can't interfere.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other person comes back, I'm aware. So somebody has probably got some precog thing going on saying that if we interfere, we know things aren't going to work.
Okay.
So we got to keep our hands off. But yeah, it seems like I'm predicting that they're wanting to be the if not on the throne, then the hand behind the throne.
I see.
I mean, they already kind of are, but it's going to be much more direct control rather than, kind of, hey, if we give you this, you'll owe us a couple of favors.
Yeah. And as we're heading toward the end of the chapter, the number man kind of thinks further on his old friend Jack, and he was kind of wondering how Jack made it this far. Was it on luck? Was it on instinct alone, or did he have some unique kind of relationship with his quote agent? So uncertainty for the number man. Interesting suppositions. He's thinking about, how's Jack even still doing this stuff, and what does this portend for the future? So with that brings us to the end of this interlude. And so now we'll move on to the final section of this arc, which is interlude 21Y. And this is the POV from Parian. Now, I've been kind of giving Parian a hard time. I admit that, because for all this time we've been following the Undersiders, and when the Undersiders need to fight, they just jump up and get things done. They handle their business, and Parian's kind of like, no, I don't want to, and only if I have to. And now we see why she is what she is. This is another good case of Wildbow kind of backfilling a character, giving us the depth that this character deserves, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. When we read mainstream comics, it's all kind of very cut and dried. Either you're a bad person, so you're going to be evil, or you're a good person, so you're always going to do what's best for the side of good. And Wildbow has shown all sorts of different shades throughout the story. And here we have one of somebody who feels like nobody's on their side, but not in more like an abandonment thing rather than an attack type thing. And so they're just going to keep to themselves. They're not going to put themselves out there. They're not going to really be for much of anything, not even necessarily trying to be out for themselves. They just want to kind of be left alone. And even though they crave connection, it never seems to work out. So it's kind of like Basra in this case. Arian has kind of just given up, or figured that it's just not in the cards, but is uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, Saba's her civilian name, and she and her family.
Oh, that's right. She's from Basra.
Yeah, she and her family immigrated, And we get a look at her life, a brief look at her adjustment to her new country. She was high school age, I guess, when she moved there, moved to the US, and then we find out what happened to her at college. She was struggled once her father had a fatal heart attack, and she had a bad relationship with a pretty headstrong guy, and that's kind of what forced her trigger on her. Unique description of her power and how she manipulates cloth to create these critters that she rides around on.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, a couple of the other capes and the parahumans that we've looked at have powers that manipulate matter.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who's studied that is that, you know, realize that even what we call solid matter has tons of empty space in it.
Oh yeah.
But here it's you're much more able to picture it because everybody has had that experience of tugging on a piece of a sweater and having a big old hole open up or whatever. And so we know there's all these little things. And because of the pandemic, we all had the joys of breathing through cloth masks for a while for most of us and realizing that some cloth is easier to breathe through than others. But it's cool how, yeah, the power that she has can kind of fill in these gaps and almost provide like sinew and muscle or in a sense to the fabric. And then when they become enclosed, then it becomes more of a rigid shape and self-supporting. So it's really well described by Wildbow.
Yeah, and another thing that I didn't consider at the time was the fact that, of course, these creations, they don't have any kind of sentience or anything like that. They're puppets, and so they only move based on her ability to control them. You know, they're giant marionettes in a manner of speaking. We get her view of the meeting with Accord and his ambassadors. Now, this is a completely dicey situation. The Undersiders are dealing with the fact that Skitter is gone. Tattletale's mind is out of commission because of her power just beating down on her. And Gru is reluctantly returning to leadership of the team. And in the next 5 minutes, Accord's going to come in and we know what a nut he can be. You know, go.
Yeah, no doubt. This is a very messed up situation. And here you have Orion, who naturally feels isolated and disconnected, and is even more so because the whole team is in disarray right now, and they're all kind of trying to figure out what's going on and what's gonna happen moving forward, and they're worried, you know, Accord's on his way.
Yeah.
So it's very unstable right now, and all sorts of emotions must be going on. Again, we're talking about a bunch of young adults here at best. Sure, they've grown a lot in the last few months, but nothing prepares you for this kind of thing.
In many ways, I think Parian ends up being the perfect character to show us, giving us an outside in view of the Undersiders at this moment. You know, it was more impactful to have this kind of a character see the chaos, the position the Undersiders are in, having it with Skitter having left, versus better that than having a POV from, say, Aisha or Brian or whatever, one of the primary Undersiders. At least that was kind of how I felt. Now, I didn't appreciate. This was another. I almost forgot to say this. This was another arc that I didn't really appreciate. Pardon me, another chapter I didn't really appreciate my first read. I have a better appreciation for it this time through.
Yeah, and you know, when Taylor got kind of had stuff happen to her, and her plan of trying to be a spy got revealed, and everybody felt betrayed, we kind of saw from the inside how people reacted, and you know, and it did kind of have a bias to it. Totally understanding, you know, they're the ones there. So yeah, Brian is on the outside, even though she is, you know, an ally, if you will, she hasn't been involved in all the drama. She hasn't been involved in all the gut-wrenching stuff that the folks have been through. And so she's just kind of seeing it play out almost like a movie and trying to see where folks are leaning and how different things are affecting them. And I think it does provide us a much more, there was a term you used where it's she's like a trusted narrator, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
because she's not in the
Reliable,
middle of it.
reliable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
reliable. There you go.
Accord shows up. Oh gosh. A couple of gunslingers walk into a bar and they're deciding whether or not they're going to, have a sip of whiskey together or if somebody's going to draw on the other one. That's kind of the situation, as it were,
Huh.
at this moment. Accord wants to kill everybody because nothing's going right. And you undersiders promised me one thing, and now we've got this situation. Your leader's not here, and you're being disrespectful, and there's some lint over on the ground, and blah, blah, blah.
What's that smell? Can somebody get rid of that smell?
Yeah. Yeah, he's not
Yeah.
happy at all.
No. And he's somebody who, yeah, is a little compulsive and meticulous, and here it's not just a little piece of lint that fell on the paper or whatever, or a corner got bent on a page in his binder. This is somebody dumped a gallon of Starbucks hot coffee over the whole thing, and it's
Yeah.
just the ink's running and the whole thing. So he's ready to just chuck it all. He doesn't care. Start over, clean slate.
Yeah.
It's not worth the effort of trying to fix this.
No, I'll take over, and you undersiders can work for me, kind of thing. That's kind of
Yeah.
where it seemed like it was going. As damaged as she was at this moment, Tattletale still manages to keep the upper hand, keep the undersiders in the superior position to deal with this guy. And as this interplay goes on, we're getting her point of view, and she's nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs.
Yeah, and she flat out doesn't even like Accord.
Mm-mm.
She hates him. She understands why they're working with him, but she just hates him. And she's got a point. He's kind of like Number Man. He seems very disconnected from humanity and just willing to toss people aside or use them like playing chips. And so that's very, very opposite of how Orion feels about things. But yeah, to your point, Tattletale does a great job of keeping Accord off balance, and she dangles that golden carrot in front of him, and that's enough to kind of bring him back to the table, if you will.
Yeah, it's enough to keep him on the side, keep him placated for now, anyway. So Accord leaves after they smooth his ruffled feathers. The agreement stays in place. Gru's gonna be our leader. Everything's cool. Don't get uppity on us. And they come up with a plan for what Lisa says was mutually assured destruction. Accord says, "I don't really want to have to kill you," and Lisa's like, "I don't want you to have to kill me either. But if you do, whether you try or succeed, all this information is going to go to people who might find it interesting about you and your relationship to Cauldron." So that's how they come to kind of a Mexican standoff, as it were.
Yeah, it's a good balance. It's a way to, appeal to stuff that Accord can really relate to. The Cauldron connection is integral to how he's going to do things. He's baked that into a lot of plans. And so if that were to come out, he'd be in really bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last thing he wants, right? Is to have his stuff disrupted. But the thing he does want is for people to take his plans seriously and to actually analyze them and maybe even adopt some of their stuff. And Tattletale presents him with that, and he goes for it. He does kind of say, "Oh, well, I almost killed you about 100 times there, so I'm glad we kind of got this worked out." It's like, yeah, whatever. But Orion's still not happy about it.
No.
She's sure that there's it's just like the old Cold War, it's like,
Right.
great, we can nuke Russia 5 times over, they can nuke us 3 times over, so nobody will do it. We all feel better, right? It's like, no, we all feel like crap. We got this sword hanging over us all the time now. And so Brian is just like, yeah, no, we better wrap this up, because all it takes is him to slip up a little bit and, get mad that somebody stepped left when they should have gone right. And then he's going to just unravel and take us all with him.
Yeah, all bets are off then. So after he does take off, and as we're moving further into the chapter, the Undersiders have a further conversation about what to do if the PRT screws Skitter. Nobody, they don't know what she's up to. Bitch is all about, as you pointed out earlier, Skitter's got a plan. You guys should have more trust in her. She's smarter than I am. I know that I trust her, and so you guys should have her back. At this point in the conversation, there was that interesting interplay where they're debating what to do. Bitch kicks that television, and bitch, it goes here. It says, bitch was the one who broke the spell. If the PRT F's with her, we destroy them. Gru finished. Bitch nodded. The most sensible member of the group in agreement with the most violent, Parian thought. All we can do is wait, Tattletale said. And so, yeah, when you've got Gru who's level-headed and like, hey, we're going to be tactical about things, and then you've got bitch who's the firebrand, and no, I need to go knock somebody's teeth in. When they're in agreement, that's probably a pretty dangerous spot for the PRT to be in.
For sure. I would like to jump back a little bit, though.
Yeah.
And I really felt like Brian kind of stepped up at the right time.
Yes.
She was this disinterested observer a little bit, if you will, and everybody's kind of bickering about stuff, and Brian just says, it's more than that. And then she finally has some attention, and she says, I think she's decided on a way to help all of us with more than Tag, and maybe she helps herself too. And nobody else gets it, but Brian is looking at trying to see this and understand it from the outside and thinking, why would she do this? Why is this going on? And all she can think of is that, well, maybe there's some strategy that by putting her head in the lion's mouth, the lion's only going to focus on her. And if she can somehow do something, yeah, she draws the attention away from everybody else so they can get their stuff done or do whatever they need to do. And, maybe she's able to pull the loose tooth out of the lion's mouth, and then the lion's happy again and not upset. To mix all sorts of different Aesop's fables together here.
And keeping in mind that this takes place in the shadow of the note from Dinah that says cut ties. So there's that hanging over our heads. So after the meeting breaks up, and then she heads back to her territory, and she has a visitor waiting for her. Flechette is there. We knew from the last the last chapter, where Miss Militia and Flechette met with Skitter, we knew that she was feeling adrift. And Wildbow's kind of been leading us up to this point with these two. He's been drawing these two together, and the two young ladies discuss the goings on, what's happening there. Skitter's at PRTHQ, and Flechette's asking her, "Did you know anything about this?" Flechette talks about how she's lost, and Parian talks about how, hey, I'm doing the best I can under these circumstances. What did you think of this conversation, this interplay between these two, as they were kind of two lost souls reaching out?
That's an excellent way to put it. Yeah, Flechette mentions that the boss, Miss Militia, had called her and said, what are you doing away from here for 30 minutes? And that's how little Flechette cares. She's just kind of not connected, as you said. And so, yeah, sometimes you've got two folks that are both lost out in the snowstorm at the same time, and they find each other and then just huddle together for warmth.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's what's happening here. They recognize that things aren't going the way either of them expected them to, but they still want to keep trying. They still want to make things better. They have some ideas on how things can be improved, and they want to keep working that direction. And Flechette wonders if they can maybe join forces.
Yeah. And so as we're moving further on here, that's the thing. She's like, hey, as Saba talks about what she wants to do, she keeps asking Flechette, hey, what is it you're looking for? And then finally, at one point in the conversation, Flechette's like, hey, well, can you take me with you as a lieutenant? Not as a partner. She says she's not good at being alone. Again, this think back to her visit with Miss Yamada, all the way back to that point. Wildbow was kind of teasing out, doing a good job with that interlude, the visits from the various wards, and this one in particular, telling us where the state of that individual. And now this circle closes here at this moment. So they're into each other. She's willing to be subordinate to Saba in her efforts because Saba's own previous experience, that bad experience she had with that guy, and she wants to make it clear, look, I'm not anybody's, how do I want to put this?
You don't get to act like you own me.
Thank you. Exactly. That was the phrase in there that Wildbow put in there. So they came to an agreement that appears like it's going to be beneficial for both of them.
Yeah. And, we're kind of left wondering as we're reading through this, well, it seemed like there was some physical tension going on, but it seems like Parahumans is not interested in that, or really, based on her past, doesn't want it to go that way right off the get-go.
Yeah.
And wants it to be on her terms if it's going to happen at all.
Yeah, I'd say that.
But then, it's like, okay, at the end, seems like there might be more than just a lieutenant kind of thing going on here. So
now we're at the end of the chapter, but I did want to touch back on the fact that if Flechette decides she's going to leave the wards, she's going to do it quote unquote, the correct way. She's going to have to give up her gear. She's going to have to give up her name, give up her costume for legal reasons. So there is a process. She's going to become a rogue, if you will, because in the broadest sense, I guess you could say that Parian, she's a rogue as well. She's a quasi villain, only by association. So if Flechette leaves, she's going to have to become someone else.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, or it was just kind of a really good turn of phrase, but I'm wondering if their new names are going to be Needle and Thread.
Could be. That's true, because Flechette, she can handle, with her power, she can launch some needles. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah, we shall see. We shall see. And that brings us to the end of the arc. So before we roll into your overall impressions, why don't we check out this question and comment from Vale? So let's see what Vale says here. I've completely enjoyed your thoughtful and engaged discussion of Worms since you started. Just wanted to say thank you as you start on the joyride of arcs to come. I frequently ask you for your favorite / most memorable sections of the story and similar. But this time, where the chili was spoiled, I feel like it goes without saying what was most impactful. So just a general question. What do you think of Taylor now, assuming you finished Arc 21, which we just did? Literally any thoughts on her? I'm not aiming for anything. What are your thoughts about Taylor Hebert at this moment?
Well, I'm thinking that she's way smarter than I am
Mm-hmm.
because I can't figure out what the heck she's on doing with this mess that she's created, but she's got some kind of plan. She's trying to follow Dinah's directions
Mm-hmm.
the best way that she could interpret them. I think she's very brave. Um, she's loyal to her principles, which can be fluid at times, but
Yeah.
she she's trying to do what's best for her group and for, in a sense, the world. She's trying to somehow avert this end of the world
Mm-hmm.
scenario that's been proposed. And Dinah's guidance, she's thinking, is following that as the way to try to make it happen, try to prevent the end of the world.
Right.
So I'm pretty impressed by her. Yeah, it's hard for me to figure out how this is going to play out though. So
Yeah, we shall see.
I'm putting a lot of trust in her. I hope she doesn't let me down.
And before we actually get to your overall impressions of the arc, I do want to say that Vale has been one of our early contributors and one of our early subscribers to our little endeavor here, our little YouTube channel. And just want to give a thanks to Vale and some of the other long timers who've been with us. And we really appreciate you being here.
Definitely.
So now, dude, go ahead and roll on into your overall impressions of the arc.
Well, this was an interesting one. It was kind of a logical extension of stuff that had come before it, with trying to consolidate things, trying to figure out how things were going to play out power wise in the city. But as usual, Wildbow threw a big old curveball into it. And we have Taylor, who is looking like she was going to be queen of the Undersiders, is now willingly turned herself in.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me a little bit, though, of Braveheart, when Mel Gibson rides along with his hands behind his head, and all the English try to grab him, and then he just starts flailing around and taking them all out. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then the revolution starts. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. I think it's going to be more subtle than that. But we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
As far as my key character for the arc,
Mm-hmm.
this was a tough one, but based on that interlude mainly, but also contributions in the fight with the teeth, and her trying to find her way around and kind of being an ally. I'm going to go with Parian.
Really?
Yeah, I think she said what needed to be said at just the right time. It's always amazing when that kind of thing happens. It's happened to me a couple times in my life where, I can remember being on a basketball team. I was a bench warmer, and one of the older guys got mad at me because I wasn't sufficiently upset about a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I just gave this impromptu pep talk. I just said, hey, you know what? Game's over. We can't change it. All we can do is try to learn from it and move on. And sitting here and getting mad and kicking the locker isn't going to solve anything. So, and everybody's just like, whoa, where did that come from? And that's kind of how I felt about Parian's interaction here. But I really think it crystallized and helped stabilize things. And so, yeah, she's my key character.
Fabulous. Okay, well, hats off to her. Okay, folks. And now we are headed to the end of our episode for this time. Another good arc. And like I said, I think this is considered informally the end of book 2. And we'll be heading off into, if you will, the start of book 3 in our next episode. And at that time, as Andy said, my stepson Tony will be joining us. And so we hope you'll be returning for that as he joins us for his next return to the show. And with that, we'll be signing off for now. So until next time, take care.
Yeah, you definitely won't want to miss it. Adding Tony to the mix brings a whole new dynamic. Sometimes I feel Keith and I are the equivalent of two guys in rockers on the porch and talking about, well, no, Joe Louis was the greatest fighter of all time,
Right.
And then Tony will come up and say, oh my gosh, please join us in the 21st century. You just bring it along a little bit. And he does it with such grace and such humor. It's just a lot of fun having him on the show with us. So looking forward to that episode, and I hope you will join us for that, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Thanks for joining us in this podcast. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we hope you return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more information in the link down below. Catch you later.